When I spoke up about my brother-in-law not contributing a dime to our shared expenses, I expected support from my wife. Instead, her silence and that piercing look told me I had crossed an invisible line. What began as a simple disagreement over household fairness unveiled a web of secrets, entitlements, and loyalties I was never meant to question. As I followed the money, the lies unraveled, revealing just how far my wife's family had embedded themselves into our lives, and how I had become the outsider in my own home. But I wasn't going to stay silent. I planned my response with precision, legal, and irreversible. It happened over pasta. I had just drained the water from the pot and set the colander in the sink when I said it. The words weren't harsh, just plain. He needs to pay his share. My back was still turned when I felt the silence stretch longer than it should have. I turned slowly, wiping my hands on a dish towel. My wife was standing at the island, spoon in hand, her eyes fixed on me like I'd just insulted her mother. No words, just that sharp, unreadable look. The kind that tells you something deeper just cracked beneath the surface. I leaned against the counter, waiting for a response. None came. Her brother Marcus had been living with us for nearly 5 months. He was supposed to stay for a few weeks while he looked for a job. He never paid rent, never contributed to groceries, rarely cleaned. His presence had gone from inconvenient to parasitic, and I had waited long enough for her to say something. She never did. I hadn't said anything. Before, I let it slide when he took the master bathroom without asking, when he drank the last beer and didn't replace it, when I noticed he used my shaving cream, my cologne, and once wore my sweatshirt. I absorbed each moment with the kind of quiet tolerance men are trained to carry like armor. But tolerance can rot. That night, something shifted. Her silence wasn't just defensive, it was accusatory, and it landed with the kind of weight that made me wonder, how long had I been the problem in my own home? We ate dinner mostly in silence. Marcus wasn't home, he was out with friends, a phrase that had become his alibi for never applying to jobs. My wife picked at her food. I watched her, noting the way she avoided eye contact, her jaw tight with restrained irritation. She wasn't angry at Marcus, she was angry at me for speaking. After the dishes were done, I found myself sitting in the dark living room, scrolling through expenses on my phone. I pulled up our shared credit card statement. There it was, my card, my money, groceries, utilities, gas. The math wasn't just inconvenient, it was lopsided. I covered 78% of our household expenses. She hadn't even noticed, or hadn't cared. I wasn't just paying for Marcus's, I was subsidizing their silence. I didn't say anything else that night, but my mind began collecting data, memories, patterns. That time her mother borrowed money and never paid it back. The family emergencies that always required my wallet. The subtle way my wife talked about money, like it just showed up. Like responsibility was an ambient thing, mine by default. This wasn't just about Marcus, this was about loyalty. About who she protected when it came time to draw a line. And I realized I was outside that line. A man notices things when he stops trying to be agreeable. That night, I noticed a lot. The toothpaste Marcus used, still half-twisted from the middle. The guest bedroom sheets, still unwashed. The phone charger he borrowed, still missing. Little things. Indicators. Proof. And my wife's gaze. That wasn't confusion, it was defense. She was defending him. I had been too patient, too quiet. I believed fairness would come naturally, that if I simply waited long enough, she would see what I saw. But fairness doesn't just arrive, it's demanded or constructed. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not directly. Confrontation creates noise, and noise alerts the guilty. I needed to think, observe, plan. In that silence, a new part of me began to emerge, not angry, but lucid, cold, deliberate. If I was going to be treated like the outsider, I would start acting like one. And outsiders don't beg for fairness, they calculate it. The next morning, Marcus was in the kitchen, barefoot, sipping my coffee. Not just the brand I buy, but from my mug. The one with the chipped rim I never threw away because it felt familiar, like part of a routine that belonged only to me. I watched him from the hallway for a moment, his back turned, posture relaxed, scrolling on his phone like this was his domain. I walked in and opened the fridge. Empty orange juice carton, 2 beers gone, leftover lasagna mine missing. Turned and greeted me with a nod, like a roommate, not a guest. You working today? He asked. Always, I replied. He chuckled like that was a punchline. It wasn't the question that bothered me. It was the ease with which he asked it, the implication behind it, that I was the one clocking in while he lived off the grid. I left without another word, but something had shifted again, more precisely. Sharpened. At work, I printed out our last 6 months of financial statements. I highlighted every grocery bill, every utility payment, every streaming service, subscription, Uber ride, takeout, meal. I marked each transaction made by my card. The yellow ink almost glowed by the time I was done. Her contributions were sporadic, small, inconsistent. But the charges from her Venmo, frequent transfers to M. Carter. Marcus, I googled him. I didn't even know his full employment history because no one talked about it. He had worked at a small marketing firm 2 years ago. Let go under unclear circumstances. No LinkedIn, no business activity. His digital presence had gone quiet. And yet, he had spending power: cancer tickets, bar tabs, new sneakers. I pulled her bank statement. She had access to one of my older accounts I hadn't closed. Quiet, withdrawals weekly. I confronted none of this. Not yet. That evening, I suggested we watch a movie. She agreed, relieved, maybe thinking I'd let it go. But I chose a documentary about financial infidelity. She laughed nervously once, then went quiet. I watched her more than I watched the screen. Her body shifted. Her hands pulled at the hem of her sleeve. She wasn't relaxed. The next day, I installed a keylogger on the shared computer. Not proud of it, but I was past shame. Within a week, I had access to her email, passwords to everything. And that's when the truth turned from suspicion to confirmation. She had been paying Marcus's phone bill for months. She had signed for a short-term loan in her name for him. He had a credit card linked to her Apple Pay. And worst of all, there were messages between them, casual, joking about how stiff I'd become lately, about how uptight I was about money. As if my discomfort was the punchline. But the message that broke the surface of my restraint was from her to him. He doesn't get it. He never will. That one hit differently. I had always assumed my silence bought me respect, that providing would translate into loyalty. But it didn't. To them, I wasn't a partner. I was a resource, predictable, passive, no more. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, statements, chat logs. I moved funds into a private account. I consulted a discreet financial advisor, a friend from college. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Start preparing options." Quietly. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed while she brushed her teeth. She smiled at me through the mirror. I returned it. But behind that smile, I was constructing something precise. Not revenge. Not even retribution. A correction. A slow, methodical shift of power back into my hands. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's been lied to, not just by words, but by silence. Omission is a form of betrayal. And looking back, I began to see just how long the omissions had been there. I started with our earliest finances. When my wife and I first moved in together, I paid the deposit. She said she'd catch up on her half once her freelance checks came through. She never did. I never asked. I told myself it was love, that we were building something, and small debts didn't matter between people who shared a future. But it didn't stop there. I remembered the first time Marcus showed up unexpectedly 3 years ago, suitcase in hand, eyes heavy with some vague hardship. She begged me to let him stay the weekend. He stayed a month. Back then, I rationalized it. Families help each other. Men are supposed to absorb the inconvenience. I called my brother that week. We hadn't spoken much lately. Life, schedules, pride. But I needed perspective. I asked him, bluntly, what he remembered about Marcus and our early years with him around. He hesitated before answering. He always had that thing, he said, where he'd test how much he could take without asking. That line stayed with me. Like Marcus was born knowing how to exploit softness. Then came the old photo albums, ones buried in cloud drives. A picture from Thanksgiving 4 years ago, Marcus sitting in my chair, at the head of the table, carving the turkey I paid for. My wife, beside him, smiling, me off to the side, out of frame. That wasn't just an accident, it was symbolic. I started seeing a pattern. The emotional economy of her family ran on dependency, not reciprocity. The one who gives the most is expected to give more. The one who asks for less is seen as withholding, and the one who questions the imbalance, he becomes the enemy. I remembered a Christmas when I suggested we scale back on gifts. Money was tight. She fought me on it, then found the money to buy Marcus a new tablet. She said it was his year to catch a break. Then there were her parents. Her father once asked me for a temporary loan to fix his car. I gave it. He fixed the car, then took a weekend trip with friends the same month. I asked her about it. She told me not to be petty. The more I dug, the more I saw I had never been part of the family dynamic. I was a bank, an anchor, a convenience. When I supported them, I was tolerated. When I questioned them, I was resented. And now, it was clear they had tested the limits for years, seeing how far my silence would stretch before it tore. But something else happened during that process. I started to remember who I was before I became the man who absorbed things. In college, I once walked away from a prestigious internship when I learned the company had a history of exploiting junior talent. Everyone said I was crazy, but I knew how to spot rot. Even then, in my first job, I had exposed a minor accounting inconsistency, something brushed off as a clerical error. My correction saved the company thousands. They promoted the manager who tried to bury it. I left. I had always seen systems for what they were, but somehow, inside my own home, I had stopped applying that instinct. I had confused emotional comfort with moral compromise, and that clarity, that old sharp part of me, was coming back. It wasn't enough to remove Marcus that would be treating the symptom. I had to dismantle the entire framework. Quietly, precisely, legally. But first, I needed to understand one more thing. What had my wife told Marcus about me over the years? So I kept digging into shared drives, deleted messages, archived photos, and what I found next redefined the entire situation. The messages between them were worse than I expected. Not explicit, not romantic, but aligned like partners in a long silent con. She wrote things like, "He wouldn't understand how we work, and he doesn't get that this is family." Marcus replied with affirmations, jokes, casual mockery. One message stood out. "He thinks he's being generous, but he owes us this stability." Us, not me. Us. That was the moment I understood the scope. This wasn't about Marcus overstaying his welcome. It was about entitlement, shared, nurtured, and quietly directed at me like a moral obligation. I closed the screen and sat back, hands still. No rage, no panic, just focus. It was time to make my exit, not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. First, I moved every remaining cent from our joint accounts into a new one in my name only. I kept the move quiet, spread across 3 days. Each transfer small enough to avoid red flags. She never noticed. Then, I made an appointment with a family lawyer, one who specialized in silent separations. No court drama, just clean division. If done right, I presented the documents I'd gathered. Financial records, proof of her funneling money to Marcus, messages that showed intent and complicity. The lawyer listened carefully. "Are you planning to leave, or make them leave?" I didn't answer right away, but my eyes told him everything. "Then we do this like a chess match," he said. He explained the steps. I would need to retitle certain assets, freeze joint credit, redirect mail, gather proof of contribution, down payments, bills, repairs, everything, all with timestamps. If I wanted the house, I needed to make it inarguable that I had built its foundation alone. So I did. Quietly, every night, while she watched TV or texted her brother, I organized evidence. I printed receipts. I pulled old emails showing her detachment from our mortgage. I drafted a timeline that proved a simple fact. Without me, none of this stood. I also contacted a forensic accountant. It seemed excessive, but I needed a second layer of certainty. She confirmed what I already knew. Marcus wasn't just freeloading. He was siphoning small amounts, frequent transfers, all disguised as shared expenses. But they weren't shared. They were engineered. While the legal strategy formed, I took steps at home. I began changing how I interacted with her. Warmer, even affectionate. She interpreted it as me letting go of the issue. That was the point. I needed her calm, unguarded. I encouraged Marcus to make himself comfortable, offered him suggestions for rooms he might use if he stayed longer. He laughed, probably thinking I was folding. But what I was doing was documenting his continued occupancy, without lease or agreement, and gathering new proof of his dependency. Then I installed cameras legal within shared spaces. They caught what I needed: his daytime habits, his absence of job seeking, his careless remarks about money. One evening, he told a friend on speakerphone, "Nah man, I got it made here. No rent, fridge always stocked. I just chill." That clip would be invaluable later. As the structure built, I changed my tone with her subtly. I asked casual questions about her plans, our future. Her answers were vague, unsure. She thought I was lost, indecisive. She had no idea I was steps ahead. My lawyer finalized the first wave of documents: property protection orders, preliminary divorce strategy, eviction notice, drafts. After all, was a non-contributing adult in a house he had no legal right to. The accountant prepared a report with charts, summaries, and a devastating conclusion. I had covered 89% of household costs over 4 years, with 94% of asset growth linked directly to my income. It was airtight, but I wasn't ready to deliver it. Not yet, because the final step wasn't legal. It was psychological. I needed them both to feel completely secure, certain that I had surrendered, that I would remain the dependable, silent one. Only then would the floor vanish beneath them. It began on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No raised voices. Just precision. At 9 a.m., I received a text from my lawyer. Paperwork submitted. Service scheduled for tomorrow. Your site is locked. By 11 a.m., I was sitting at my desk in the home office, reviewing final details. Eviction paperwork for Marcus was prepped and dated. The forensic accounting report, annotated and ready. Copies made, filed, encrypted. I waited until she left for yoga, as she did every Wednesday. Marcus was still asleep. He never rose before noon. That morning, I opened every window in the living room. Light flooded the space. I sat at the kitchen island, the same one where it all started, and laid out 3 manila folders. Folder 1, financial abuse, personal and marital. Folder 2, unlawful tenancy, non-contributing occupant. Folder 3, divorce and division of assets, precedent, evidence. Each document meticulously labeled. Each paragraph built like a blade. She returned at 12:17 p.m. I heard her keys in the lock. Her gym bag thumped softly against the wall. When she walked into the kitchen, She paused. She saw the folders. Then she saw me. I didn't speak first. I let silence do the opening. "What's this?" she asked, already knowing. I nodded to the first folder. "Start there." She sat slowly. Her hands hovered above the documents like they might burn her fingers. I watched her eyes scan the contents. At first, she didn't understand the full scale. Then I saw the moment her breath caught when the Venmo records appeared. When the screen captures of her texts with Marcus appeared in sequence. She looked at me then, not angry, not yet, just exposed. "I don't understand what you're trying to do," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "No, you don't." I pushed the second folder toward her. "The one about Marcus. This is a legal tenancy," I said. "You've facilitated it. You've redirected funds from our joint account to support someone who has no standing in this home. That changes your position in any property discussion." She tried to speak. I raised a finger. "Don't. Not yet." She opened the third folder. The most painful, it laid out the breakdown of our finances from the beginning, her 11% contribution over 5 years, the discrepancy in retirement accounts, home repairs, loan repayments, and the statements. Her words, in her texts, about me. She closed the folder. "I didn't know you were this cold," she whispered. I let that sit. I didn't reply, because this wasn't about emotion. It was about calibration. For years, I had allowed imbalance in the name of love. But love without reciprocity isn't love. It's leverage. At 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was the process server. She accepted the envelope in silence. Her hands trembled. At 2:15 p.m., I knocked on Marcus's door. He opened it shirtless, groggy. "What?" I handed him an envelope. "You've got 30 days. He laughed, not understanding. Then he opened the papers. His face fell. "You're evicting me." "No," I said. "The law is." He stormed into the living room, yelling. I remained seated. My wife said nothing. Her eyes didn't leave the folder. He pointed a finger at me. "You think you're above us?" I stood, finally, calm, controlled. "No, I'm just no longer beneath you." He threw the envelope across the room and left. The door slammed. Silence followed. She didn't cry. She just stared at the folder. "Is there anything I can say?" she asked. There was, months ago, I walked upstairs, one step at a time, each movement deliberate, each breath steady. That night, I slept in the guest room, alone, no anger, no regret, just relief. Justice, when done right, isn't a storm, it's a subtraction. The morning after the papers were served, the house felt different. Not quieter had been normal. This was emptier. As if the air itself had been cleared of a lingering weight I hadn't noticed until it was gone. Marcus left within a week. Not 30 days. 7. He slammed cabinets, muttered slurs under his breath, tried one last time to provoke me. I said nothing. He left a half-packed suitcase in the hallway, maybe expecting someone to run after him. No one did. He texted her twice after that, then stopped. She didn't cry, not in front of me, but I noticed the way she lingered in doorways, the hesitation in her steps, like she was seeing the house for the first time, not as a shared home, but as a structure built by someone else, someone she'll know. Longer understood. We continued to live in the same space for 2 more weeks. I gave her time. That was intentional. Let her sit in it. Let her feel what I had felt for years, displaced in your own home, surrounded by decisions you didn't make. Her lawyer reached out. We had prepared for every clause. Every financial artifact was accounted for. The forensic breakdown destroyed any claim to equitable division. Her team pushed back weakly, then conceded. She signed a separation agreement that favored me entire house, primary assets, even my car, which I had paid for in full, but titled jointly out of goodwill. That goodwill was gone. She moved out. On a Thursday, she didn't say goodbye, just left the keys on the counter, beside a note I never opened. I didn't need closure in her words. I already had it in her silence. The house became mine again, not just legally, but spatially. I repainted the walls, removed the photos, replaced the dining table, the one where Marcus used to sit like he belonged there. Each change was an undoing, a return, but the consequence wasn't just physical, it was psychological. I began seeing the smaller ways I had compromised myself over the years. How I'd reshaped my habits to avoid tension. How I'd allowed my identity to be absorbed by their needs. I stopped inviting friends over. I worked longer hours to avoid home. I let myself shrink into usefulness, mistaking that for peace. Now, with no one watching, I started expanding again. I reconnected with old colleagues, took on a consulting role I had once declined, signed up for a trail running group. Small moves, quiet ones, but rooted in freedom. One night, I got a call from her father. I let it ring, then blocked the number. Another from a mutual friend. "She's having a hard time," they said. I responded simply, "So did I. No one called you then." The consequence of clarity is often isolation. But isolation isn't loneliness, it's space. I had space now. In that space, I built new routines, read more, cooked for one without resentment, left the bedroom door open, slept without tension, dreamed, For the first time in years, without interruption, I didn't seek revenge. I sought balance. And balance, I've learned, doesn't come from giving more. It comes from knowing when to stop. It's strange what we remember. Not the arguments, not even the betrayals. What lingers are the quiet moments, too quiet. In hindsight, like the sound of her phone screen lighting up at 2 a.m. Or Marcus laughing from the other room while I worked late to cover the mortgage. Or the way she used to say, "We're in this together." And how icily I believed it. People talk about betrayal like it's one moment, a kiss, a lie, a single cut, but it's rarely that clean. Most betrayal is cumulative, small choices, layered one atop the other, until the weight becomes unbearable and you realize no one was ever holding it with you. Looking back, I don't blame them for being who they were. I blame myself for not noticing sooner. There's something dangerous about being the dependable one. People begin to see you not as a person, but as infrastructure. You become the floor beneath their feet, and no one thanks the floor. They just walk on it, until it moves. I never set out to destroy anything. I wanted fairness, partnership, a home that wasn't built on silent compromises. But when you ask for fairness in a place built on imbalance, you become the disruptor, the ungrateful one, the threat. I've learned that sometimes the only way to restore order is to remove yourself from systems that thrive on your silence. To stand still and let others reveal who they are. When you stop enabling them, it wasn't easy. Letting go never is. Not of a marriage, not of family myths, not of the hope that people will eventually become who you need them to be, but I let it go. And in that release, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I don't miss her. That surprises people when I say it, though I rarely do. One missed the idea of hearth aversion I once believed in. The partner I constructed in my mind. The one who would have stood beside me, not behind me, while her brother drained us both. But that person never existed. I created her. Out of love. Out of hope. And when I stopped needing hope to justify pain, everything became clearer. Justice isn't about punishment, it's about correction. A rebalancing. A quiet course set back to true north. Today, the house is still quiet, but it's mine. Every room, every chair, every silence, and in that silence, I hear myself again. Not as a victim, as a man who finally stopped apologizing for expecting fairness, as a man who rebuilt not for revenge, but for dignity, the kind of man no one walks over again, and that, I've decided, is enough.